Welcome, everybody. I'm so excited to welcome you here to today's sneak peek webinar with HYCU, where we're going to debut one-click backup and recovery for Box. If you have any questions, please leverage the chat and the QA functionality. I will make sure to address any questions that you have. You will receive your own personal copy of the slides and the recording itself. My name is Andy Fernandez. I'm the Senior Director of Product Marketing here at HYCU, and this is going to be one of my favorite webinars because we're debuting something that I think is exciting, something that most of us use, whether it's on a personal level, but also at an enterprise level as well, and that is Box. Now, before we get into that, the agenda that we're going to focus on is really understanding why are we here? Why are we having a conversation about backup for Box, which is a cloud-hosted service? What are some of the threats to that data? What is your role and the responsibility of protecting Box? And then how has regulatory compliance evolved to cloud services like Box? And at the end, if you stay toward the end, I'm going to give you a preview of how you're going to be able to safeguard Box with HYCU R-Cloud and how we're able to protect your entire technology stack, but especially critical applications like Box. So let's get started. A little bit about HYCU for those who have not encountered us yet. We're the fastest growing data protection vendor in the world. We have over 4,200 organizations that trust us with the crown jewels of their environments. We work with hundreds of partners globally, and we have an industry-leading customer experience with a Net Promoter Score of 91. Our entire focus is not one single application. It's protecting your entire technology stack. And because of that, we have strategic technology partners from Google to Nutanix to Okta, Atlassian, Dell. And most importantly, for today's conversation, we are a Gartner recognized enterprise backup and recovery vendor as well. We're backed by organizations like Bain Capital, Acru, Cisco, Atlassian, and Okta. And our entire pedigree, our entire focus, everything that we care about is making sure that your data, your applications are protected and that they're always recoverable. Now, why are we having this conversation about Box? You might think, well, Andy, Box is a cloud-hosted service. So this is probably a very different dynamic. I'm not responsible for any of this. Now, before we get explicitly into your responsibility with Box, indulge me for a second in understanding how we've even gotten to this point today. Let's go in time travel a little bit and go back 20 years ago. Whether you were head of IT, or you were an IT administrator, were you a backup administrator, life was very different. Your responsibilities, the scope of your responsibilities were very different. What do I mean by this? It means that everything in your organization lived in a castle. And that castle was your data center. It's a place that you can physically walk into and understand and evaluate and manage and touch your storage, your networking, but also your virtual and physical infrastructure. All of your business applications, production, everything lived in this data center. So whatever you were doing was all focused on this thing that you can see and touch. But the world started to change. We started to see kind of the first leaders and movers in the SaaS industry. And you saw organizations like Microsoft say, look, you are spending a lot of time managing and maintaining SharePoint server on-prem. Why don't you subscribe to Microsoft 365? We'll manage all of the infrastructure, and you'll have emails, you'll have file storage, you'll have everything available for you there. And you also saw that in CRMs with Salesforce, and you see it also in the first use cases of public cloud, where organizations were looking at the cloud for cost-effective storage, as backup, as failover targets. But still, critical applications lived on-prem. You fast forward a little bit more, and you started to see organizations not only lift and shift, but actually just start building applications in the cloud from scratch. Meaning now I'm leveraging these services that do not exist, they do not touch my data center, and it's a completely different dynamic. But the main focus and the reason that we're here today is talking about how in the last 5 years, really in the last 10, SaaS applications have completely exploded. Anyone with a credit card in your organization can technically purchase and provision and start using a SaaS application. It could be something like Box, it could be Jira, it could be GitHub. It doesn't necessarily even mean just IT. We're talking HR, we're talking finance, we're talking sales, we're talking marketing. We've seen organizations where marketing and sales have a more larger tech stack than the CTO of the organization. The point here is that we used to live in castles. We used to manage the castle. We had uniform infrastructure to manage that castle. We had our virtual machines or physical machines. Now, everything outside of maybe some tier 1, tier 2 applications that you're still running on-prem lives in completely different places, in different vendors, relying on third parties. Third parties from massive cloud providers like AWS to specific applications like Workday or DocuSign. Everything used to be hosted on-prem. Now everything lives in different places, in silos, in completely disparate workloads. Now, what does that mean? Well, there's a direct correlation to this and the growth of third-party risk. Every day in the news, you will see issues or you will see scenarios where there's some form of supply chain and third-party risk. We're fully aware of the CrowdStrike incident, but that is just only one isolated incident. We've seen public cloud vendors accidentally delete entire projects of organizations. We've seen supply chain attacks destroy organizations. We've seen customer data get lost because of supply chain attacks. And this is changing, and it is truly impacting all of us. Every single one of us, our data lives within third-party resources, not only just our personal lives, but our organizations, the infrastructure that we use, the applications, even what we're using today in Zoom is a third-party resource. The critical data that we have in Zoom, the recordings of these very private, very important conversations to the business, they live in a third party. And cyber criminals, attackers, they understand that this is an extremely high return on investment. So when you look at how environments have completely changed, where we live in a world where your organization could be using dozens, if not hundreds of SaaS applications, but now each of those SaaS applications is a new third-party risk. Now, don't get me wrong, SaaS and cloud is incredible. They brought us technology and use cases we would have never dreamed of 20 years ago. But that doesn't mean we have to have our eyes closed to risk. We have to treat them responsibly. And what we're seeing too is a complete evolution in how regulatory agencies, the EU, so many other organizations at both federal and different levels are evaluating and adapting their compliance mandates towards third-party risk, towards SaaS, towards cloud. Let's take, for example, DORA. It's targeting financial organizations. Many of us on this call are Box users, and Box is a main use case for financial organizations as well. But DORA touches all organizations and their providers and has very specific requirements that I would call cloud and SaaS savvy. This is the first time we're seeing this in the industry. But it's not just financial institutions. It's all critical infrastructure. We are seeing compliance finally start evolving to make sure that they can curb third-party risk. The reality is we no longer live in primary data center only organizations. We are all connected, our data is fragmented, it's siloed, and we have to make sure that we have cyber resilience in place across the board. Now, that brings us to today's conversation. Why should we have backup and recovery for Box? I've been using this for years. I thought that I didn't have to be responsible for backup and recovery. But let's understand a little bit, what are some of the threats to Box? Regardless of how you're consuming it, but most of us are talking about consuming Box as a cloud-hosted service where we subscribe to it and we leverage their storage and their infrastructure. But what we're learning today about Box applies to every other application that you're using, but we're really going to focus on Box. And what I put together is a little bit of a matrix here around what is the probability of this threat, of this happening, versus what is the impact on the revenue. And when you think through this, think through your organization and think, how are you using Box today? We've seen public case studies where organizations with thousands of sellers leverage Box as the main storage for all of their collateral and all of their assets. Other organizations are storing all of their research on Box, and many others are storing critical customer health data on Box as well. Now, with that in mind, think through what kind of data exists in Box, how is your organization affected by this, and let's understand some of the risks to this. The first one, and it's the one that we can always count on, is human error. You can pretty much guarantee in your organization that there will be human error. And what I mean by this is somebody simply deleting something. I do it once a week. Everyone in your organization, no matter how technical, is going to make this mistake. People are working quickly. People are often distracted. You're going to see deletions happen all of the time. We even see it in the news in very large scale events. Now, deleting specific files may not be a massive disruption, but deleting several folders, deleting several critical aspects of your Box data might be a problem and might have an impact on your customer experience or even from a compliance perspective. But the reality is it's going to be disruptive to your organization, but it's going to happen a lot. Then you can guarantee that there's always going to be external cyber threats. Organizations who are cyber criminal organizations or individuals who are looking to exploit your organization, steal your research, exfiltrate, or even encrypt that data in order to extort a ransom from you. Now, the probability is that they're always trying to do this. They might not always be successful, but you can always guarantee that this is going to be a known threat vector for your organization. And of course, this can have a massive revenue impact on your organization. And then there's insider threats. We have conversations with CIOs and CISOs all the time, and they may tell us, well, I'm not really worried about insider threats. I'm more worried about external cyber attacks. But guess what? If you can no longer name all of the employees in your organization, you are now at risk of cyber threat, or of an insider threat. People are disgruntled. People make mistakes. People can be upset. Even if you're bringing in contractors, folks who you haven't offboarded effectively, the threat of insiders is real. And there's real research and evidence showing that this does happen way more than you think in your organization. And then, of course, there's going to be the corruption. This has plagued the industry for decades. As long as there's files and folders out there, there's a possibility that they can get corrupted. And of course, there's going to be automation errors and box scripts that your organization runs where somebody makes a mistake and performs a mass deletion event. And of course, even sync errors are going to be threats to your data. And of course, the lowest probability one, but the one that's still something to think about, is also the revenue impact to your organization if there is something that does happen to Box. Now, these are specific threats to your data that have an impact on your organization. Regardless of what application you're using, these threats exist, but they especially exist within Box. But that's not the only reason to think about backup and recovery. There's also going to be regulation. Now, I spoke a little bit about DORA. This is something where the deadline is actually hitting DORA, I believe, January 25th of next year. And DORA is aimed at financial organizations. But keep in mind, this type of regulation is going to apply to most organizations in the future. Now, what DORA does really well is actually understand what organizations are using today, not 20 years ago. So they understand that you're using services like Jira, like Box, like GitHub, like Microsoft 365 that hold very, very critical data. And in their articles, they devote an entire section to response and recovery and what your organization is responsible for. By the way, for those that don't know, DORA carries personal and criminal consequences for organizations who don't adhere to it knowingly. It brings fines similar to the size of GDPR, and it's something that's going to be truly, truly focused on in the EU as well. But let's take a look at this article. Specifically, it says you must have backup policies and procedures specifying the scope of the data. You must have backup policies. This doesn't mean that I'm simply taking a copy once every 6 months, putting it on a hard drive. These are backup policies. This means it requires automation, and it depends on the criticality of information and the confidentiality level. What kind of information is your organization storing on Box? I think for most use cases, it requires Box to have very aggressive backup policies. But here's the part that's also very unique. Because of third-party risk, because sometimes we're not in control of what happens to vendors, DORA is requiring that you have offsite copies where you can perform an offsite recovery of the service. This means that your recycle bin is not a backup. It's not eligible for DORA. It's something that you need to have completely offsite. For those who've been in the industry for a very long time, this is basically the 3-2-1 rule: 3 copies, 2 media types, 1 offsite. This is the fundamentals, but in the world of cloud and SaaS, we've forgotten about these fundamentals a little bit. Now, you may be thinking, well, the reason I went to a cloud service is because I want them to manage all of the infrastructure. Not my problem. They should have backup. This is not my problem. But let's talk about shared responsibility. And the shared responsibility model that Box adheres to, that Atlassian adheres to, that Microsoft, AWS, Google, Azure, everyone adheres to, is called the shared responsibility model. And the way that it's set up, it's basically the organization saying, look, you are no longer hosting the server or data center edition of your software. We're going to host it. We're hosting all the infrastructure. You will subscribe to us. We will make sure that the service is always running. You no longer have to worry about maintenance. You no longer have to worry about Patch Tuesday. We're taking care of that. Just use our service. And they are responsible for all of this at the system level. So if there is an outage, if there is a serious cyber event, it's Box's responsibility to recover the information. Now, Box does an incredible job. They follow the 5 nines. They go above and beyond for their customer base. But there's still a personal responsibility to all of us as users and customers of Box. and that is at the tenant level. Let's use an example of a parking garage that will help understand this. When you're leveraging a parking garage, what do you expect? You expect to be able to drive in, pay at the kiosk, park your car, go to dinner, go to a movie, come back, your car's still there, you drive out, you never think about the incident or the garage again. But what happens if you leave your window open? What happens if somebody scratches your car? If somebody hits your car? Are you going to expect the garage to pay you for that? No, they take no responsibility because you didn't lock your door. Somebody scratched you, maybe you didn't have insurance. That's not their problem. It's almost as if you live in an apartment and somebody comes in, you left the door open, they take your things or they break a window. It's not the apartment's responsibility. It's your responsibility to protect your data. It is impossible for the folks at Box to understand if the deletion that your administrator made was a good deletion, meaning I meant to do that, or a bad deletion, aka an accident. So the reality is that as a user of Box, when it comes to your files, your folders, your instance, that data is your responsibility. And it's in their terms of use. It's in their contractual language that you are responsible for backup and recovery. Now, this is why it's so important, and this is such a big strategic focus for us, is making sure that organizations can do that very thing, which is make sure that they can protect Box with backup and recovery that meets DORA and NIS 2 compliance standards, but also allows them to recover their data as fast as possible. And that is the HYCU R-Cloud platform. And the ability to protect Box will be available very soon. You can sign up for the waitlist, but I'm going to show you what those capabilities are and what you're going to be able to accomplish with HYCU and Box. Now, a little bit about our platform. We're the #1 SaaS data protection platform in the world, but what we focus on is protecting the entire technology stack. So we deliver enterprise-grade backup and recovery for your critical infrastructure. Think your virtual VMs or your virtual machines, your databases, your storage, whether that is on-prem or in the public cloud, HYCU R-Cloud gives you that protection. But also, if you're running applications in the cloud, native applications, data pipelines in Google, development in AWS, we protect those critical services. But for today's conversation, we also make sure to protect all of those business SaaS applications that your organization relies on. Now, one thing that we want to mention here is a lot of folks may think, well, I can simply probably script Box, or I can build something or buy a tool from the internet that allows me to quickly script and back up Box. But the reality is that Box is critical, but it's one of your applications. You want to have centralized control of data protection, not only across Box, but across your entire technology stack. This will make your life as an IT administrator, as a director, as a CIO, much easier when you know where all of your data is protected and you have one vendor that you can trust. Now, a little bit, when we talk about trust, one thing that I do want to mention here is the reason we're so excited is because we're really bringing enterprise class backup and recovery, a trusted data protection to Box. We are a visionary in the Gartner Magic Quadrant. We were the Google Partner of the Year. We're the leader in cloud native data protection, and so on and so forth. You can see the accolades that HYCU has. When you're trusting the backups of your most critical data from Box to GitHub, you want to make sure that you have a vendor that will be there, that you can trust, and that has the reputation for protecting the crown jewels of environments all over the world. And that's what HYCU is able to do with the R-Cloud platform. Now, let's talk about what those actual capabilities are. The first and foremost, when we're talking about backup and recovery, what do we really mean by backup? Keep in mind, a lot of organizations think, well, I can probably script and schedule a backup. This is expensive, this takes a lot of time, and this is very, very error-prone. With HYCU, you have what I would call a backup autopilot. You simply assign, within one click, by the way, a set and forget policy that automates all Box backups. You click it once, it's good to go. Then when something bad happens, whether it's a deletion, a SIG error, or insider threat, you can restore anything from an instance to a single file or a folder and a web link in one click. And of course, you can even export that data from a DR perspective. But this is what's most critical. The copies are off-site. You have control of this data. HYCU does not store the backups of Box. They are in your control, in your estate, Whether that's in the public cloud or on premises, this is in your complete control. And the reason I mention this is because that is what DORA is requiring. That is what true third-party risk management looks like, always following the 3-2-1 rule with Box. And of course, even being able to enable immutability of those Box backups is very critical. If there is an insider threat, it's very savvy, or a serious external cyber threat, you want to make sure that there's always a safe copy of that data offsite. And that is what HYCU is able to do. But I wanted to keep honing in and double clicking on the security component, because this is very, very important as you evaluate your backup and recovery strategy. Let's take Box. We've talked about this. There's a couple options for you. You may be thinking as well, Andy, Box, I could probably send them a support ticket and they will help me. And the reality is, props to Box, because they do a tremendous job of doing their best and saying, look, send us a support ticket and we'll do our best to recover it with no SLA guarantee. Now, if you are a user with an organization with a couple of users of Box, that's okay, that's fine. But if you are an enterprise with hundreds of users, thousands of users, terabytes of critical data, you want to be in control of your destiny. And you want to take in consideration that you, as a user, as an organization, can back up and recover that data. Now, some of the core tenets that HYCU follows is the backup system must be accessible outside of Box. This kind of disqualifies the recycle bins, especially because compliance does not allow for recycle bins to follow up as backup. So the system that you're protecting Box with has to be outside. The copies of Box have to be completely logically separated away and in your control. This is a compliance requirement. And of course, if there is the worst thing that can happen, a ransomware attack, they are completely accessible regardless of what happens at the source. Now, our focus here at HYCU, this is not a tool. This is an enterprise class data protection platform, the most powerful data protection engine in the world. And because of this, the way that we're protecting Box, you can scale to protect the largest environments that you have. You can meet the SLAs that your organizations have, and you can even define how frequently you want to take those backups. You have complete freedom to keep your data in your control, meaning in the public cloud or on-prem. You can protect all of the applications in one place. You are not managing 15 disparate backup tools for Atlassian, for Box, for AWS, for GitHub. Everything is in one place that you can control with one vendor that you can trust. And of course, you get to work with a Gartner recognized organization with an NPS of 91. We have a pedigree of data protection, and we have a pedigree of always helping your customers, regardless of what happens in their environment. And the most important thing for those organizations who are thinking, well, Andy, I have incredibly strict data residency requirements and data governance requirements. So data is not allowed to leave our organization, our territory, our region, or zone. And we fully understand that, which is why think of HYCU more as a highway, a fully encrypted highway from Box and any other service that we protect to the public cloud in a storage bucket that you own, or even on-prem as well. And the most important thing is data is encrypted at rest and in flight, of course. HYCU does not store these backups. These are backups in your control. You control where the data residency is. You control the full network, the identity access of this. It's stored in an S3 bucket on the storage class of your choice. And of course, you can enable immutable backups. The reason I mention this is there could be tools out there. There could be organizations that say, we'll protect Box for you, but they do so in their storage. And when they do that, you are adding a new layer of third-party risk, trusting an organization where somebody else can access these backup copies. Our philosophy is simple. Your data should be in your control and in your hands only, no one else's. HYCU is only there to facilitate that data to your control. Now, what I want to show you for a second is a little bit of a sneak preview. This service will be available in February. You will be able to sign up for a waitlist of it, but I kind of want to show you a little bit of what this user experience looks like and what you're going to be able to do with HYCU to protect not only Box, but your technology stack as a whole. So let me share my screen again. Gonna make sure I can share. And so what you're seeing is me going into R-Cloud. I am being able to say, I'm logging in right now to my R-Cloud account. And this is going to be the single pane, the single place that you go to protect your organizations. But I want to show you something super interesting. Because a lot of the times you might not be aware of how many different Box instances your organization has. You might not be aware of the sheer volume of applications that your organization is using. So I'm going to show you something here called rgraph. By the way, this is free. Even if you're still not protecting Box with HYCU, this is a free service that you can leverage. And all you do is you connect Okta or Entra ID in your organization, you add an API token, you start the discovery of that, and HYCU is going to expose all of the critical services that exist in that organization. Think of this as your company. These yellow nodes, those are departments. If you're ever interested in understanding, well, what is marketing using? What is engineering using? What is my HR department using? What are the applications that they're doing, that they're using? For example, Jira. Well, what you can do is not only identify the total volume of applications that belong to that directory, but actually double click and say, look, this specific application that you're leveraging doesn't have self-service recovery, which means that if you delete something, you are going to lose that data. There's no backup automation and there's no offsite storage automation. So for example, if you are a financial institution in Europe, you will not be DORA compliant. So what it does is it allows you to create almost a full tree and a map of your data and then start understanding what needs to be protected. Now, let's talk about what happens after you discover these applications. And maybe you're going to discover multiple instances of Box. Well, what you do from there is you can say, well, here's the HYCU marketplace. This is where more than 80 integrations live that you're able to protect. And you can say, well, I want to protect something like Jira, or let's grab Confluence. I want to protect Confluence. So what you're able to do is simply understand how HYCU protects Confluence, what are the things that you can restore, and immediately configure. Once you configure that, HYCU will automatically discover all the projects and the instances that are assigned to that. But let's focus a little bit on Box. It'll discover the Box instance, and here, in one click, you can assign a backup policy. That's it. Once you assign that policy, it will work in perpetuity. It is what I like to call a set and forget policy, which essentially means that once you assign it, at the times that you designate, you will be able to guarantee that HYCU is protecting this data at the schedule that you've determined. But then what happens when there is a deletion? Somebody makes a mistake, or maybe there's much more serious event. Well, you can simply restore. And you can restore everything from an entire instance down to a specific file or a web link. This is true granularity. Why is this important? Well, if somebody deletes a very critical file, do you really want to recover your entire instance? No, you want to just restore that specific file, get it extremely quickly to the person who's made the mistake, and move on with business and keep your organization productive. But it's not just that. You're able to also export data, and you're also able to always manage your recovery points. This is super important if there's an insider threat or even a cyber attack. You can go to a safe point in time and perform your recovery there. But a lot of your organizations may be thinking, well, I actually think there's several instances of Box that I want to protect on a very, very frequent base. Well, then in that case, if you don't want to simply assign it in one click, you can build your own policy. And you can say, well, for Box, instance number one, I'd like to take a backup every 6 hours. And then I'd like to retain that period or retain that data for a year. And then I want to store it here. And when we say store it, what I actually mean here is you can choose where that data goes. You can send it to Amazon S3, you can send it to Google Cloud, or on premises as well. And you're choosing the storage class. And then once you assign that policy, that's it. HYCU is automatically at the designated point in time, always going to send that data to that storage location. You always have a place where you can guarantee that you have the offsite recovery of Box from file and web link all the way to an enterprise instance. Now, with that, you've seen a preview. A lot of you may already want to get your hands on it, or you might want to sign up for the waitlist and understand a little bit more information. So what I have here, and let me just share, is if you're interested in understanding more, you can scan this QR code and download the data sheet. Understand what are all the capabilities, what are you able to do within Box, and then you can also sign up for the waitlist. So if you scan the QR code on the left, you'll be able to sign up for the waitlist and make sure you're the first one to get notified when you can start protecting Box with HYCU R-Cloud, along with every other application that you have. So with that, I want to thank you all so much for your time, for your attention. This one's special to us. Box is an incredible service. So many organizations and customers rely on it, and its data is so important. We're thrilled to welcome it to the HYCU marketplace, and we're just getting started. So looking forward to any questions that you may have. Please sign up for the wait list. We are here to help. Have a great day.